Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV. And a quick reminder that tomorrow's show with Jane is 1 hour later than normal, so don't get there too early. It's 8 p.m. UK time. But anyway, as we continue our look at Norway in World War II, we turn our attention to the German imprisonment of various groups of people. We look at foreign prisoners of war interned in Norway. We will look at the wider Norwegian camp system and the members of the resistance and others interned. Welcome to World War II TV. Cathrine, good evening. How are you today?
Good evening. I'm fine. Thank you.
So we're great to have you here for this subject because it's all been a bit exciting and SOE and bombing raids, and this part of the story is so important. I really wanted to cover it. But before we get you to start talking, do you have a label you like to give yourself in terms of your role in history? Historian, researcher, archivist, academic? Is there a label you particularly like?
I'm definitely an historian, and I work a lot with British history, actually.
Cool. A good, solid, traditional historian. So there we are. So, folks, we've got plenty of slides. I'll bring up the slides now. If you have questions pertinent to what's being talked about, so some of the statistics or the information about the camps, we'll do them as we go along. Wider questions about perhaps how Norway looks back at this part of its history or the camp system abroad, and then we'll kind of do them at the end. But I will do my best to get to as many as we can. But I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint now. So it's over to you to take us through this story. So internment camps and POWs in Norway. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Well, as you said, I'm going to talk about internment camps, but I'm also going to talk about the development of it, and it changed during the war. And I'm going to give you guys some examples of the Norwegian POWs, and especially some from the Special Operation Executive, or Company Linge, as some prefer to call them. And I'm also going to talk a bit about foreign POWs and German prisoner guards. And we're going to round up with the capitulation and what happens in the first days of the peace period afterwards. So you can move the slide, please. Yeah. I think it's really important to remind everybody how complicated and complex the camp system really was. It was an industry, and that meant that it was so many camps and so many different prisoners that we can't just sum it all up in one group or 5 groups. It was all kinds and all shades and all colors of people who ended up in those camps because the ideology of Nazism was so extremely totalitarian and brutal, and the enemies that they gained just grew during those 5 years. And that meant that as they expanded into Europe, they just had to make more rules, make more laws that the enemy could break. And because of that, the numbers of prisoners just increased. So I think some of the viewers might be a little bit surprised about how many different kinds of prisoners there were, how many camps there were, and even be a bit surprised that, for example, children was imprisoned in the camps. But I'm going to talk more about that later. And I'm going to use most of the time talking about camps in Norway. Eventually, the prisoners were sent to Germany, many of them, but not all. But because this was an industry, it started somewhere, didn't it? And it started in the streets where we live today. And that meant that when Norway was occupied, they had to put the prisons somewhere. And we had a county jail prison, but that wasn't big enough by far. So what they actually did, they confiscated the houses and made new prisons. And I do happen to work in the Gestapo house in Bergen, and I work at Espeland prison camp. So we have prisons in normal houses, and we have those camps. So it might surprise people that many of the prisons are still intact. They are preservated, and you can walk into them today. So if you just slide away, we do see a picture of Bergen County Jail, and that was the first place where the prisoners landed. It was here, and it was in the Gestapo house where most of the torture and more severe, sorry, I don't have the English word for it, but the torture was done in the Gestapo house, but in Bergen County Jail, the prisoners were kept overnight. So this is a normal prison, but it kept an own department for German prisoners and an apartment for regular Norwegian ones.
Just a quick question for you. We've talked about, for example, Operation Barbarossa, and there's this ridiculous notion that the Germans had no idea about the number of Soviet prisoners they were going to take, which is nonsense. They knew what was going to happen. They knew they'd been dealing with it. And we talk about taking France in 1940 and the hundreds of thousands of prisoners they took there. How much preparation had the Third Reich done in advance of attacking Norway? Obviously, they're planning the military attack and the occupation, but are they giving much thought to prisoners and numbers and setting up, or are they kind of doing it once they get there?
Not really much, I would say. They were expecting some, of course. They knew that the resistance would occur, but to me it seems a bit naive. Actually, I don't like using the word naive, but it seems to me that they didn't really expect that kind of resistance and that number of strength and people, maybe as it was during the winter between 1940 and 41. Before that, it was really slow, but when it exploded, I think they were a bit surprised. They expanded the Bergen camp in 1942. They had to expand the camp and move it.
Okay, thank you. Next slide.
Yeah. So this is the first prison camp in Bergen. It's called Ulven. This was actually a military camp before the war, but it was used straight away, maybe from June 1940, when the first prisoners came from the county jail. And they continued using this until the fall of 1942, but they had to move the camp because they needed more space, and this camp wasn't secure at all. It was actually attacked by British soldiers in the winter of 1940. It was close to the sea, and they couldn't secure the camp. And in the beginning, it was pretty okay to be there. So if you just slide away, we have a picture, and this seems quite nice, doesn't it? You can see a woman lying on the grass there, and some German soldiers guarding the conversation. But this is a woman visiting a prisoner, and she's outside the fence. But it seems okay, and I think we can say that it was a lot better than many other places. And eventually, as the resistance movement grew and things got harsher, they needed to make a camp that was a lot more secure, and it became a lot more strict.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Espeland prison camp, and that is actually the only camp that is left in Norway of all the 100 camps that were built. It was built more than 600 camps during those 5 years, but today this is the only camp which is preserved by 80% of the original buildings. So this camp was built in a really harsh and cold valley, far from the sea, but really close to the railway. So they could move the prisoners. It was not. It was just a transportation camp for prisoners going to Oslo and eventually to Germany. And here we see some pictures from straight after the war, actually, but this was how it looked. And we can see the building on the right hand is where prisoners lived. And the building on the left side is actually a barn. They kept a horse and they kept cows and pigs, and yeah, they needed food. So it looks nice, and the buildings are still there. So it's interesting to see that it hasn't changed a lot.
I think we're burdened with, in some ways, as trying to understand that period, that we know were the very worst type of camps that the Germans had. We know that there are absolutely extermination camps, death camps, concentration camps, and then you slide backwards. We've done, for example, shows about some of the Channel Islanders who were taken away to places where they were interned for the duration of the war. So you can't compare the conditions of somewhere there where families were kept together and they had pianos and they had fairly decent food with the other end of the scale. So I think it's always, as you said at the beginning, there are many, many camps under different labels of different, and just because one seems less harsh than the other doesn't excuse the overall methodology the Germans are using, which is to divide and to intern and to put people away. Of course, there are levels of barbarity, but it doesn't mean it isn't interesting to look at them all. And just because one isn't as bad as the other doesn't mean it isn't still broadly terrible.
I think the Germans treated Norwegians better because we were Norwegians, like the Aryan race. But as the war became harder for Germany, they treated the prisoners harsher than before, and they lacked people that could manage the camps in a proper way. In the beginning, it was skilled people who was doing that, but at the end of the war, they used anybody they could get hold of. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so after being interned in places like Espeland, the prisoners were taken by train to Oslo and sent to Grini or prisons in Oslo, but mostly at Grini. Some of the prisoners never went to Germany, but many of the Norwegian prisoners did. And as we shall see a little bit later, some of them came to Grini and was executed there. So they were never sent off any other place.
Just, I want to put the comment up from not this one, but this one. Bergen is watching. So Espeland had horrible and little food, according to my grandfather's brother. So as often happened on World War II TV, we've got someone in the audience with a direct connection via their family with the subject matter at hand, that's what I love about the internet. The fact you're talking about it in Norway, here I am in Normandy listening to it, and then we've got someone else there who has a relative who was in one of those camps. So it's a perfect symmetry of how it works with that. So thanks for sharing that with us, Bergen. If you have any more snippets of information, please do fire away and we'll put them up later on. So fantastic.
Yeah. So at this slide, we can see an overview of what kind of nationalities, number of camps in Norway, with number of prisoners from these countries. And the biggest amount of prisoners from other countries came from Soviet, Russian POWs. And then we had different POWs from different countries, as you can see here. But if you go to the next slide, it's easier to understand the diversity of it, because as we can see here, we had prisoners in these camps from places like Australia, from China even, Great Britain, of course, the States, and Sweden even. So most of these other nationalities were Danish prisoners, prisoners from the Netherlands, and quite many from Belgium, actually, yeah.
And just looking at that, we always talking about logistics and how certainly by the middle part of the war, the Germans are struggling to do anything anywhere. They're running out of oil, they're running out of the management of moving groups of people around the occupied zones. It's insane. You know, I mean, I know obviously there are various reasons why these nationalities have been in the area where they end up in these prisons, but given that they're moving people around France, they're moving people in and out of Italy, they're moving people into the various Balkan areas, and they're trying to win a war. It's extraordinary the efforts they put in to just forget about the actual construction and management of camps, just the transportation. It's insane.
I never really understood that, especially if you look at the Norwegian prisoners. We have prison stories from several. Take a woman I know the name of. I think she was in 7 camps in Germany. I mean, why?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's unlogical, actually.
It's one of those things that we'll never completely understand. That, and then you add that to the ideology, add that to we've talked about it so often, that even when they're losing the war, they're still doubling down on murdering people they don't like and interning people and well, I guess it's the Nazis and the whole insanity of it all. But yeah, when you sent me that slide, I was thinking I would have never have guessed there had been that many nationalities there. It's just every day's a school day, folks. That's what I love about learning about World War II. So back to you.
Yeah, we were talking about Bergen County Jail, and the picture on the left here is taken of some prisoners a couple of days before they were executed. And this picture was taken in 1941, I believe. And they knew that they were going to be shot. And they were some of the first one who was shot in Bergen. This is taken in the backyard of the prison in Bergen. And I love this photo because, to me, if you didn't know who they were, you would think that this was some kind of New York street gangsters, wouldn't you? But it's something about the attitude. They're just standing up and looking straight at you, and I love this picture. The other one is another prisoner from Bergen. He was one of the first who was sent to Germany, and he died there. It just speaks to me, this picture, because you have his name in front. His last name was Sætre, and he's naked, and he is also just looking at you like he doesn't look scared. And that is the thing that occurs to me, that okay, here I am, remember me. So this is some of the oldest prisoner picture we got of actual prisoners. They're pretty rare. We have police pictures of prisoners, but these are rare. So that's why I wanted to show them to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we move on.
Yeah, I talked about how many different prisoners there were. And if you see the boy on the left side, he was a prisoner at Grini in Oslo. He is 14 years old. And the boy on the right side, he was 15 when he came to the Gestapo house in Bergen in 1942. We had old ladies above 60, younger ladies raped in the cells in the Gestapo house. We had kids like him. We had a girl, she was 14. She was arrested 6 times and taken to the Gestapo house. And this shows that the prisoners wasn't just resistant workers. They came in because of all kinds of things.
We had the question from Ian about were any of the prisoners political, because we've talked about on the channel before, the Germans have a knack of finding a reason to just arrest anyone they don't want to for just activism or you know, faces they don't like. So political prisoners can be a very large sort of coat hanger word for all sorts of reasons. I mean, we know from other countries, if the Germans want to lock someone up, they'll find a reason. But are there specific character categories? Obviously, resistance fighters are specific category, but in terms of the 60-year-old women, are they supporting the resistance? Is that why they're arrested? Are they activists? Are they what reason would they have given for arresting someone like that?
Well, the woman on the left side, the older woman on the left side, she was a political prisoner, and she came in about the same time as the woman on the other side. And they were activists, both of them. They were arrested in 1944, which means that it was a more experienced resistance movement working at the time. But they were communists and were definitely activists, yes.
Okay. We also had a question from John about, were any of the camps set up by the Quisling government or were they all German run? Great question.
Yeah, great question. No, none of these camps were set up by the Quisling government. It was either prisoners of war kept in the camps or camps set up by the German police.
Okay, thank you.
The security police camps. Yeah.
And then we had another one, and I'll let you go back to you. But while we've got photos on the screen, Gwilym is asking, did the Germans, or the Gestapo is saying, but did the Germans photograph all prisoners as the NKVD did? I mean, I follow the Auschwitz Memorial account online, and they're always sharing photos of people who passed through Auschwitz and mostly were murdered. Was it routine to take photos of prisoners?
Yes, most of the time. But there were prisoners that wasn't supposed to be photographed, and that was because maybe let's say SOE agent coming in from England he was kept secretly in the prison, and none was to know that he was there, and they would not take those prisoners' picture because if someone got hold of it, that would send a message that, for example, okay, he's alive, or it's a proof that he's there and he's alive. So there's many reasons for why they're not photographed.
Okay, thank you. Back to you. Next slide, or we finished?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one thing is being imprisoned, but those prisoners from, for example, Espeland did work as they were there. So it's true that they didn't have a lot of food, like one of the viewers pointed at. It's true. But at the same time, they were sent out to do labor work, and it was pretty much, they could walk around freely, and at these trips outside the camp, they could meet regular people that could help them out with some food, or could help them send letters or whatever. And now we're really looking at a gang here that is out not far from the camp. They're having the prison guard with them, and they went out every day in a period of time, and as long as they just did what they were expected to do, most of the time it worked fine. The prison guards were okay, but I'm not saying they were nice. I'm saying okay.
Okay.
If you compare them with others, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Great stuff.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the special guests in the Gestapo house in Bergen, and eventually in the prison in Oslo. The guy you see on top here, on the left side, this is not a photo taken in the prison, but he was one of the guys that wasn't photographed. He was locked up in a single cell, isolated, because they were afraid to send a message about his condition. But what we are looking at agents from SOE coming to Norway in two operations, Operation Anker and Operation Penguin, who was sent into Norway in the spring of 1942. And during this period, there was a generic operation called Cockfight, with 15 operations planned and sent into Norway. And Operation Anchor and Penguin went horribly wrong when the two operators, the one on the left side and the guy on the the guy beneath and the guy on the right side were discovered in a house in Telavåg outside Bergen. And they shot two German policemen, and this ended with the village of Telavåg being burnt down. This was the start of a really big wave of arrests, and they actually discovered 6 of the 15 operations in Operation Cockfight. It was a disaster. It was 1942 was the black year for the Norwegian resistance. And the guy on the right side was shot in Telavåg, so he died. The other two were taken to prison. The one upstairs, he was kept in Oslo. The other one was taken to the Gestapo house in Bergen, and later to Ulven camp before he was sent to Grini. And at Grini, he ended up being executed in 1943. Okay. This is actually a picture from Telavåg in 1942. And the guys that you see on the picture here has just been arrested and are taken from the houses to the sea. where they are put on a boat and taken to Bergen and the Gestapo house. So all the men in the village are taken out of the village, arrested, and most of them were sent to Germany. And this is a policeman standing on some hill taking a picture of them. They were taking a lot of picture that day in Telavåg. So we know a lot about this arrest operation, this action here. And I think they had about 30 prisoners in the Gestapo house at the same time. So it was really crowded there at that moment. Yeah. So what Reichskommissar Terboven decided was that the village was going to be burnt down. They just blew up the village. They took all the houses. There was nothing left. Anything. It was just rocks. They destroyed the water system. There were nothing left. And this has been compared with actions in France, like in after the killing after the killing of the German police chief.
Yeah.
The same spring, yeah.
And Lidice in Czechoslovakia as it was then. And the interesting thing is you see the pattern of resistance across the occupied countries. So in 1940, it's sort of a bit random and disorganized, but it hasn't been broken yet by the Germans. And you get the period kind of 42, 43, where the Germans are really learning how to do counter resistance, and they start infiltrating the escape lines in France and Belgium and Netherlands and Norway. And then, as you said earlier, by 44 again, as the Germans are losing the war, the resistance generally seems to gain traction and become more effective again. But it's interesting that you see the same sort of timelines in the various countries. It's fairly consistent across the middle part of the war, as you're saying. 42 is probably the darkest period for most of these occupied countries, because as the resistance get more active, the Germans get better at crushing it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the actions in Czechoslovakia and France came as a result of the special operation executives mix up, right? So they do send in agents, they do train resistant workers, and the answer is just terror. And this was also a war crime that was a part of the international war crime deal after the war.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is one of the other prisoners from Telavåg. He is in Oslo by the time this photo was taken, and eventually he ended up in Germany, but he was one of the guys that came home. So many of the men from Telavåg died. Some of them came home, but I think it was about 32 of them that ended up in Germany.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have other kinds of prisoners in the Norwegian prisons and in the Norwegian camps. Here we see some Russian labor slave workers, and this is a really famous picture because it says a lot.
Yeah.
We use this picture in the museum at Espeland. We have blown it up, like, because you can see you meet the eyes of the prisoner, and you can tell that he's not just another guy, he was a human being. And that's the point here, that all of these prisoners from Russia or from Yugoslavia, whatever, they weren't looked upon as human beings like Norwegians was. And it's really important to remember that people were divided into groups, and luckily for the Norwegians, we were looked upon as human beings.
Yeah, these people here are just, they're commodities, aren't they? And the SOE people captured, they're kind of perceived by the Third Reich as being terrorists. Then you have the political prisoners, and as you said at the beginning, the types of camps in somewhere like Norway or wider is very, very varied, and there are people there for various reasons. And these poor souls here are just there to get every ounce of work out of them they possibly can for the war effort. And if they die, they die. That would be the German kind of policy there. It's thank you very much for sharing the different types of camps and the different types of prisoner, because it's really interesting. And that's a harrowing photo. I'll move on from it because it's powerful but very moving.
Yeah, and I want to show this object because in Norway, many of the Russian prisoners are remembered because they made birds like this, which they traded for food or cigarettes or whatever. And a lot of the people around the camps that lived here, around the camps, they paid for food or whatever with these birds. So I think most of grown-ups in Norway over at least 50 know what this is. And it's called a lucky bird, and it's related to a Russian myth of it brings luck, and I think this is so it's a prison bird which can fly over the walls, so to speak. And on one hand, it's a payment method, but on the other hand, it's a kind of craft that could keep up the faith for the prisoners who was making them. They had something else to do while they were there. So we know a lot about a lot of these birds, and they are in many homes in Norway, which and they do remind us of those Russian POWs that was here.
Yeah. And we've got, sorry to interrupt, we've got another viewer with a direct connection to the Russian prison war. So he did 2 messages to get his story. So my grandmother's family lives just next door to the camp for Russian POWs, and the family used to put out food for one of the prisoners during his captivity. After the camp was liberated, then it goes to the next message. The prisoner came to the house to thank the family for the help and gave them a cigarette box made out of a zinc plate he'd used to eat from. I inherited that box when my grandmother passed. So from what you've said there about the birds and what Maka said there, is that despite being from very different parts of the world with very different languages, there's still some bond between Soviet prisoners of war being held there and the local population, which is ironic, given that the Germans, as you said, kind of think of the Norwegians as being Aryan, and they want to kind of go in there and Germanize, but actually these local Norwegians are feeling far more affinity for Soviet soldiers. So it's fascinating how it all works.
Yeah, it's so funny that she's mentioning this zinc box, because we got a couple of them, and I've seen them, and it's like the birds. They are very particular. You can recognize them, and I think it's a nice thought also in these days when everything that's happening in Ukraine shows that on some levels we are just humans, and there are so many aspects of this.
And I must add Janet's comment as well. And she, of course, did a presentation a couple of years ago about the massacre there in the village. That was 2 or 3 years ago. She said, the first man I interviewed was still weeping for Russian prisoners held in his fishing village. This man was kept in a hole with a tin roof. I don't know if he survived. He also wept for his teacher. So thank you very much, viewers, for bringing this extra information to the presentation there about these connections, because it's important. And as Dennis said there, this is amazing history. So yeah. And then the Firebird also used a motif elsewhere in history. So Yeah, lots to unpack here. It's a fantastic presentation, but back to you, and we've got questions building up for later on as well. So back to you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I want to talk about humans, and I was mentioning Russians and all the things that are happening today. We might look at Russians like animals that are killing Ukrainians, and of course they are. But we also looked at Germans like animals in those days, and we kind of tend to do that still. But the picture is not black and white, it's gray, and it's always gray.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing here is a picture of some of the guards from Ulven. And this is a police battalion that came to Norway early during the war. These men looks pretty young, but later there were prison guards in Ulven and in Espeland who was actually older guys who had attended into World War One, and they were reservists from police battalions that would just they used them as prison guards, but not all of them were Nazis, and not all of them were working for the Nazi system. Some of them were actually helping Norwegian prisoners, and they were actually contributing to the Norwegian resistance movement. And this might surprise many people, but we have some beautiful stories about these prison guards that did everything they could to make life easier for the prisoners, and actually put their own life in danger to help the Norwegian resistance movement.
Thank you.
This is a great picture. I love this picture. And here you can see some of the older men that came from Germany and had been to the First World War. Some of them just hated war. They didn't want to be in Norway. They wanted to go back home and have a quiet life. And I mean, this picture says it all. This is not the Gestapo.
Yeah.
We can see that this is a totally different gang, actually.
Yeah, this isn't the elite, the elite chiseled Aryan soldier. They've all got a bit of a middle-aged tummy like I've got. And thanks for reminding us that you know it is nuance. Not every German is a Nazi, and yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
Next one.
Yeah, this is two of the good guys. The first one, he was called Gandhi, actually, and he was the chief of the county jail and the camps in Bergen. His name was Kurt Trampler, and he looks like a real Nazi, doesn't he? And the thing is that he wasn't. He was putting his own life in danger throughout the years when he was here, and he was one of the guys that went the farthest to help the Norwegian resistance movement, and he did a lot. There is so many testimonies about him and about Alfred, that is the man in the other picture, who was called Kind Alfred. His name was actually Robert Alfred Kissling, but he was just called Alfred. And both of them are celebrities in Bergen in the way, because they help people. And we have tried to track down the families of these two guys, but we have not succeeded, because as far as we know, Alfred went back to Germany and he ended up in the Russian zone. So for many years, it wasn't possible to get in touch with the people where he lived. We now know that he came back to Germany and he was actually divorced from his wife, and that's all we know. We don't really know whether he got any children or where he's buried, for that matter. But we would love to get in touch with his family. We haven't got in touch with the family of Kurt Trampler either. So I want to reach out to people that might know these guys. If anyone in Germany recognize these names, please get in touch.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's comments in the sidebar coming in about the myth of the clean Wehrmacht and things like that. And we're not, of course, denying that the German prisoner of war camp system isn't anything other than cruel and barbaric. But at the same time, it's important to highlight the stories of the good guys, because as you said, human beings are of all types. And acknowledging that there are some good guys on the bad side, as there are some bad guys on the good side, is important. So if anyone's watching this, then do get in touch. Great human interest stories. Back to you.
Yeah, I would just like to underline what I started saying, that Nazism was extremely brutal.
Yeah.
So I'm not denying anything. I'm just saying that things are gray. It's not black and white.
Actually, we had a question about the guards from Andreas right at the beginning over in Germany. Were there Norwegian guards at some of the camps as well? He's talking about the fact in Belgium there were some Belgian guards attached to prisoners of Belgium. So were they all Germans, or were there Norwegians as well?
No, there wasn't really a Norwegian guard. They had people working for them.
Yeah.
In the prison, could have jobs like bringing food, or having some of the prisoners doing special work, but the guards were Germans or from Austria, and I believe some were actually from the German side of Czechoslovakia.
Okay, thank you.
Even Poland, I believe, yeah. Okay. Yeah. This picture is taken on the 8th of May in 1945. And here we see some young kids with a mark on their arm, which is the Norwegian resistance movement taking over Bergen. This picture is taken 6 o'clock in the morning in a Bergen street after the war is over, and they are on their way to arrest Germans and Norwegian Quislings. So when Germany capitulated, it immediately changed everything, and also in the camps, of course. This picture is taken the day after, because the prisoners in Espeland wasn't let out before the day after, because the Bergen police was afraid that they would have a clash with the Germans at the camp. So they needed to get an overview of the happenings in Bergen. And the day after, they were ready to go to the camp and had prepared with guns and whatever. But what happened when they came there, they was met by the commander of the camp, who handed over the keys and said, "Hello, welcome to the camp," and they just left. So the takeover was quiet, and there were no violence. The prisoners were taken out of the cells, and here you can see some of the prisoners that had been kept in isolation. Some of them didn't know what was happening on the outside, and they didn't know that peace was close by a couple of days. They didn't know anything the day before. So when they were taken out of the cells, they were afraid because some of them was about to be executed when the peace came. They didn't know what was going to happen. They haven't spoken to anyone. So some of these guys were actually supposed to be dead, but they lived because the peace came.
Great photo.
This is on the 17th of May in Bergen, and here we see Russian prisoners parading along with Norwegians and celebrating, maybe, I don't know. Many of them had problems when they came back to Russia because they've been in prison, and I don't know what these guys knew, but I assume that they had a idea that everything wasn't over yet. But this is on the National Day of Norway on the 17th, so it was a big party, and I really hope they had a great day along with everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely great photo.
Yeah, so here we are today. This is Espeland. As I said, most of the camp is preserved. We have put up a memory park, as we can see in the photo here. It's the camp was used to imprison traitors and war criminals after the war. So it continued to be a prison camp until 1953, actually. So it didn't stop by that, and after 1953, it was used as a training camp for the civilian guard in Norway. So it's been a camp in one way or another all the way until 2015, when it was handed over from the Norwegian state to a trust where I work today. And this is the reason why so much of it has been preserved. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been preserved. If it was used for something else, it would have been destroyed like all the other camps in Norway.
I think it came up in something we discussed a few years ago, that even at the end of the war, simple things like food and firewood, I'm sure it came up where lots of camps were just stripped because they are wooden panels and they need food, wood to keep warm. So the fact, as you said, that this carried on being used as a different type of camp for another nearly a decade is what we have to thank for the fact it still exists.
Yeah, actually. And I mean, I guess that they just took what was there and used it for some purpose. The German furniture and everything, and used it purposely in the year to come after the war. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is also a picture taken in Espeland. The camp was surrounded by 4 watchtowers like this, and we had to reconstruct it. This isn't original, but it's built by original drawings, so it looks like this during the war. And we had to rebuild the fences around the war, the camp. They're not original either, but they are built from the original drawings, like during the war.
Blueprints and whatever. Yeah, because the Germans were always methodical with their planning and organization. So yeah, amazing stuff. We carry on through more photos.
Yeah, this is some handcraft from Norwegian prisoners during the war, and I especially love these ones because if you look at the figures here, you can see the second from the left, it's a lion with a snake around the neck.
Mhm.
And that is the Norwegian lion in the heraldic weapon of Norway. And the snake around the neck, who could that be? It could be Quisling, or it could be Germany.
Mm.
If we look at, for example, the second from the right, you see a Viking king. So it's symbolic. If you look at it, it's like you need to look closely to see what it is. And um, I don't think the Germans understood this one. Otherwise,
Mm.
it wouldn't have been here today.
Mm. Mm. They're amazingly well crafted as well. I mean, like the bird you showed earlier. I'm never not amazed by the quality of things that are made by prisoners in camps. You know, when I was in Poland last year or the year before, looking at the things made in Stalag 3 and Colditz, it's incredible what skill sets could be found and what people can do with very little in adversity. But yeah, the artistry in those is amazing, amazing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. Okay, so this is a picture from Espeland today. And as you can see, we have Kurt Trampler and Alfred on the walls. We don't have any objects that belong to them, so we can't exhibit that. But we do tell the story about them in the exhibition here. And I know that a lot of people especially love the story about Alfred, and
Mm.
he's just famous. I was on in a radio show when we were looking for Alfred, and I had so many telephones after the show. People was calling me and said my grandfather told me about Alfred, or my grandmother met him, and I know this, and I know people know a lot of things
Mm.
about them, but they're Norwegians. They're not uh, Germans,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll get Andreas on to work on that. And it's important with a museum project like this is that despite you've got to educate people about the dark side of the war. You can't ignore the
Mm,
atrocities, you can't ignore the deaths, you can't ignore them. But at the same time, you've got to balance it with the visitor experience. If people leave somewhere like there with a bit of a positive story to balance out all the negativity, they're more likely to recommend their friends to go there because it, it's it's how you tell stories. You do it's I think we've had it on this show where people talk about making people have their vegetables alongside their Sunday roast. It's when you go to a museum like that, you want to convey the horrors, but you also need to give something that's uplifting. So I can imagine how those stories are the sort that get people responding in a positive way to the whole museum experience.
yeah, you can't have black without white.
Yeah,
That's how it is. And
exactly.
we need to keep real. We're not doing this to polish any history because the history is black enough. But this is the truth. And I mean, uh, I've never had any negative responses on us um, presenting this side of the story. My experience is that people are grateful that we do mm, show a nuance here.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Well, one more photo to go, then we've got a few more questions for you. So, yeah, back to you.
Sure. The trust that is running the camp is also running the Gestapo Museum in Bergen. And this is a totally different exhibition because this is the real deal. We're in the original police prison. It's smaller than a camp, obviously, but this is small. I mean, we have 4 prison cells, which is covered with inscriptions on every wall. And we do have inscriptions both from the war period, but also from the period after, where both German and Norwegian traders have made inscriptions on the wall. There are inscriptions in German and in Norwegian and even in English. So this is a museum that is a lot more pointed at the torture and the police, obviously. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and as you said, important to, when the story is very bleak, to not hide away the bleakness, but also it's about balance. It's about balance, isn't it? About, as you say, black and white. So, well, that's the end of the main presentation, folks. There's a few questions been building up for you, so we'll put them to you there. So Gary is saying, can you comment on the so-called bomb hostages, prominent Norwegians who would be executed in the event of the resistance movement bombing Nazi targets? Hello?
I'm a bit confused here, because what he's saying is be executed in the event that the resistance movement bombing Nazi targets. I'm wondering if he is talking about, for example, the bombing in Oslo of the Møllergata, or maybe the school in Telavåg in Bergen with the Allied plane coming in and bombing. So I'm not sure what he's asking about. Could you please give an example?
Okay, well, give an example, Gary, and we'll come back.
Maybe it's easier to answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll do some other ones. So these are much easier ones. Lisa is asking, are there any memoirs or diaries that you can recommend in English for people to read more about experiences of people in the camp system in Norway?
Yes. You want diaries from Norwegians, not Germans, right?
I suppose anybody who was part of the camp system.
Yeah, I would especially recommend Oscar Magnusson, who's got a book called I Want to Live, which is the best book I've ever read about imprisonment and torture and going through the camp system. And it's so just so to the point. No, no painting big pictures. He's just saying the words straight out. No magnifying of anything. He doesn't need to do that. So if you could get hold of that one, I would absolutely recommend that.
Okay, and if you can maybe send me the link to the title, I'll put it in the description later on. And Lisa's also, you're talking about the museum that you work at, but are the memorials? Lisa is asking, in Norway as well. So, for example, the Blood Road came up in the sidebar earlier. So, if we talked with Robert yesterday about the number of Commonwealth War Grave cemeteries there are in Norway, and obviously there are cemeteries of people Norwegians killed. But are there memorials to camps that where they have been taken down and removed? Are there some that have a marker that indicates that's where there was one?
Yeah, you do have the Grini Museum, but close by you do have what's called Trandumskogen, the forest of Trandum, which is the place where Norwegian resistance movements members who were executed was buried, and it's a really powerful area. And you can also go to the same kind of forest in Trondheim, outside Falstad. And here in Bergen, you also have memorial sites for graves, obviously, but you do have some places where both Norwegian and Russian prisoners were buried in a forest with which is a memorial site today, and that is called Tannebakken. I can also send you a link.
Yeah, send me any links you want. I'll add them to the description. Thank you. Yeah. Well, this is a question that I'm sure you will absolutely love answering from Keith here. It's because it's about how to do some research. So Keith is saying a family member was arrested for having a firearm, was sent to Guinea and then to Germany. Would I be able to obtain a record of what happened to him? Thank you, says Keith.
Yeah, you can have a record. If you go to a webpage called Fanger.no, I will give you a link. You can search up his name, and if he's there, and he probably are, you can find links to the National Archives imprisonment protocols. Maybe you can find a picture. And that goes for everyone who know a name or of a prisoner, and you can find prisoners by using prison names of prisoners, or different other
Locations and
ways
dates
to
and
search. Yeah.
search terms. Yeah. Well, hopefully that will help you out, Keith. And if in any doubt, get in touch with me or get in touch with Cathrine. But so Gary is expanding on his questions. You said apparently these prisoners were kept in internment as a repercussion to resistance attacks. I don't have any specific examples, any reference. And then he says, but were apparently prominent Norwegians. So I think it's like what they call the prominenti, who are the guys kept in Colditz, who are Brits with sort of connections to aristocracy and things like that, who the Germans kept prison. I assume that's what Gary's referring to. So prominent Norwegians held in camps to be used as a bargaining tool or to be murdered in terms of reprisal.
Yeah. There were taken well-known Norwegians as hostages, and there were taken well-known resistance movement members or politicians that after happenings like bombings like that as reprisals. And I assume that is what he is talking about. So if he want to know anything about them, he can go to the same page, which is Fanger.no. You will find them there, and there you might also find stories about the happenings, because they are publishing stories about prisoners and the context now.
So Keith says, thank you. My father's uncle, he never saw him again. My father's brother was trained under Major Laudel. He was forced after escape to Sweden and then flown to Scotland. So again, another fantastic kind of personal connection with, despite the sad endings. So my last question to you really is about, we talked about it, how you set about talking about this history of Norway's camps, and you mentioned the hundreds of camps there were, without somehow comparing it to, as we said earlier, the very, very worst end of the Nazis, you know, the death camps, Treblinka, Sobibor, because internment is internment. We said that right at the beginning. So if you're from Norway and you're interested in World War II and you go to your museum, then see your camp, and then perhaps a year later you travel to Poland and you go to Auschwitz, in some ways it's not the same experience, but at the same time it's an example of the same mechanism. The mechanism is in place. So how do you balance it, given that Norway wasn't the very worst of the Nazis, but at the same time more significant?
Well, I want to refer to the difference between the Gestapo house and the Gestapo museum and the camp, because the Gestapo museum got some authentic cells, and this is the actual place where people was tortured.
Yeah.
And that make a lot more impression on people, like going to Auschwitz or one of the other camps there. You feel it, you can physically feel it. And I think that we have to rely on authenticity. We have to find traces of the real deal, so people can in some way or another relate to it on an emotional level. And did that answer your question,
I think
or
you did. I mean,
forget
no,
something
no,
here?
you did. I think it's about, we must all not be tempted to make comparisons when comparisons aren't due. I mean, I had Christian on from Denmark a couple of weeks ago talking about the resistance in Denmark compared to, for example, the resistance in Poland, where you can't compare them. Poland had an entire army of people going about who to some extent were armed by other people. Denmark, much smaller country, location, but you can't, it's not about putting these countries on some league table of how bad things were or how significant things were. I mean, it's not really pertinent to your particular conversation. My takeaway from all this series of Norway shows we're doing is just the fact that Germans are keeping thousands and thousands of troops in Norway right till 1945, troops that could have been better used elsewhere to defend Normandy, to defend Italy. And I think from the Germans obviously had a lot of significance about Norway. They kind of, Hitler got a bit obsessed about it in terms of the defenses. And this camp system, you say you can't compare it with elsewhere in Europe, but you can look at it and look at it for its own history. And I think that's what you're doing, and that's what the other Norwegian historians have been trying to convey, is say don't make comparisons, just study Norway as Norway.
Yeah, they are trashing democracy anyhow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good point. It doesn't. Yeah, they're very good point. So, well, we will leave things there. It's been a fantastic conversation. I think that the people are summing it up very well in the comments there. That Andreas, thank you both. Learned a lot tonight. Very informative presentation. So there we are. So folks, I say Jane is with us tomorrow. So a non-Norwegian guest, but Jane is now living part-time in Norway, and it's about her quest to visit the sites connected with Lofoten and the islands and the 1940 battle. So I'm looking forward to that. And then on Friday, we have Eric on from the USA, or another non-Norwegian guest, although he has Norwegian ancestry, looking at the Norwegian battalion that served with the US Army. So we're still in Norway, but we spread our wings a little bit to talk about other countries. So thank you, everybody, for your fantastic questions. Thank you, Cathrine. Thank you, everybody. See you all again tomorrow. This is Paul Woodadge for WW2TV saying enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Bye.